Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Alpha Nooner today. We are very excited to welcome back Aaron Miles, CIO at Verano. Excited to talk about what has been going on in the world of cannabis. We were just joking earlier. It's never a boring day in cannabis. There's always something interesting to talk about. Definitely want to encourage you guys out there to join the conversation too. So if you guys have any questions, comments you want to throw out, you are welcome to do so. All of that said, Aaron, thanks for joining us. Would love to start with a little temp check. How are you feeling? We were just talking about it. We're almost halfway through the year. Busy first half of the year. We're coming up on a long weekend. How are you feeling?
First of all, Mackenzie, a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy our time together. So thanks for having me back on. I think there's a big disconnect between what people see, what's happening in the market versus what's actually happening in reality, right? And so when you take a step back and you look at cannabis as a whole, going back to when Illinois flipped on to adult use, Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, Maryland, like you have PA on the cusp, Ohio along, announced that it's, going to adult use, Florida's on the cusp. And so that's great in and of itself. And you have states decoupling 280E, and then you have the big moves at the federal level. So the temperature check is, we're actually, kind of breathing right now. We're like, we're past the OMB, we're into the rulemaking process, and I know we're going to touch on this in a little bit more detail, but like, things are feeling pretty good. And, from a company perspective, it's like, we're very self-sustaining in the terms of, producing free cash flow. And so we're not necessarily tied to a lot of what's happening in the market dynamics. So again, I think that gets very much the headlines, which obviously everybody, who's invested in the space is going to pay attention to that on a daily basis. But when you really look at this from a longer term perspective, I mean, there's a lot of tailwinds that are being built up right now.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. It's sort of on the short side, you can see things move up, move down very much, but sort of focusing in on or zooming out and kind of seeing the longer term story, what progress is actually being made, how far we're actually coming, how operators are operating, makes a huge difference. But I understand if people are frustrated in the short term, but ultimately, hopefully, presents an opportunity in the longer term. I know when the DEA stuff started kicking off and everything was up like crazy, I was like, oh, shoot, I missed it. I should have put in more. And I feel like it's one of those things, to each their own, of course. But yeah, I definitely hear that too. Also, hey, Stevie, great to see you. Well, so I'd love to start with, I know all the conversation has been around DEA rescheduling, of course. Would love to talk through kind of what you guys are making of the process so far. What are you making of the process so far?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's historic, right? And this isn't, a small move that was made at the federal level. And you have the highest level of government, probably the highest office in the world right now talking about rescheduling. And you have Biden come out and talk about wanting to right some wrongs and reschedule the three. And they really bypassed, a significant step and they went right into the rulemaking, which was big for us as a whole, right? So we're going to continue to watch how this plays out, but this basically starts to really create a stronger path to cannabis being accepted at the highest level of the government. And what does that mean? What we want as an industry is just to be treated like a normal business. And being treated like a normal business gives us everything that we want and really can help accelerate the growth. And by that, I mean, banking at the federal level, being able, we had $194 million of cash on the balance sheet, which virtually earns no interest, right? We can't hedge anything. We can't, hedge any of our risks. We can't use credit cards. We're a cash only business. And you start to layer in what it would look like for us to just operate like a normal business. It's game changing. And then you start to layer in institutional dollars coming in. You start to look at being able to uplist into one of the big three, U.S. exchanges. And so what we can do is, and we don't run the business based off dislocations in the market. We continue to be very self-sustaining. $21 million of free cash flow in Q1. We produced $73 million in 2023, and that was on top of, again, now our favorite subject, 280E. We paid $167 million of taxes in 2023. And people are very well versed on how that has impacted the industry. But we've quantified it to the tune of around $80 million going away, and just literally with the snap of a finger. If the government says you're a legal cannabis business, we're rescheduled to 3 and 280E goes away, that makes us much more powerful in being able to invest those dollars back into the business. So the right steps are being taken. Schedule 3 alone, we're kind of scratching our heads to try to say, okay, what does this mean from a banking perspective? Does it get you uplisting? Most likely not, But what we're doing is we're positioning the company to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, if and when those happen. So that's why we moved to the CIO Canada. That's why we're senior exchange listed. We have our S3 filed. We went through our first SOX audit. And not a lot of companies in our space can say that they've done that. So, don't run the business based off dislocations in the market, but when and if these opportunities present themselves, we're absolutely ready to take advantage of them.
That makes sense. I want to push a little further in what you said about, does it mean uplisting? Does it mean banking? All those things. Does it? I think it doesn't instantly mean that for sure. I think I definitely agree there. But don't you think that does help kind of push towards those things eventually? Do you guys have any expectations as a company when that might be along in the process? I know, again, you're not planning for it and counting on it, but.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, I don't see how they get a rescheduling done, a reclassification done to Schedule 3 and not have a banking component, right? We meet with people in DC and you're sitting down talking to offices on both the left and the right. And on the right, you sit down, and this is all about USA. This is USA jobs. And there's 500,000 people that work in the cannabis space, and that could literally double overnight if the government could just get out of our way and let the industry actually grow the way that it needs to. And so you start to think about that. So you have job creation, which is higher taxation back to the government. You have economic value add, which we've talked about before, which is we've seen studies that have shown that for every dollar spent in a dispensary, there's $2.50 spent in the outlying areas. And now think about 50 IPOs happening in the US, right? So you have legal fees and banking fees, and then us taking that 194 million, actually a little closer to 144, we paid off 50 million of our term loan, which we can touch on here in a little bit. But moving that into a federal banking system, and we're just one company, right? So everyone focuses on what the 280E elimination could do to the government, but in reality, what could the acceptance of cannabis do? And so when you start to think about the government paying attention to this now, and we say the same thing, we're like, don't look at us as cannabis. Look at us like a widget. Look at us as like an XYZ corporation. And when you do that and you look at the numbers we're putting up, we're basically a quasi-private company that produces $1 billion a year. I mean, it's just like, it just doesn't make sense. So when the government actually sees what the opportunity is in front of it, I think banking would be a no-brainer. But again, cautiously optimistic, but we are hearing hearing things that some banking reform of some sort is in the works here. So,
and do you think that gets done sort of? I know I don't want to pin you down to specific timing, of course, but do you think that can get done sort of in the Biden administration, or if, let's say, it gets turned over Trump, or Biden continues on, or maybe Kennedy, who knows, in that sort of later section, does that change at all? I think that story is the same where you need that banking, but is it different?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, Schedule 3, it's a great move, but it doesn't benefit both sides. And so I would say, banking probably has to be somewhere in between what we just heard and full implementation. I don't think it's going to be an after the fact type of move because there's, obviously some things that are going to have to be worked out on that front as well. So, I mean, I don't think it would be out of the realm over the next few months to have, some type of banking, something be presented. But again, I say, don't take my word for it because we've been wrong 10 out of 10 times in this stuff. And, I think people get frustrated, but it's like we relay the information, we're getting, and this isn't us just making stuff up. It's actually the hard work that we're doing in DC. And, you think about it too, from a cannabis perspective, we had COVID hit, we had the Ukraine, you had SVIB go under, you had FTX, and every time we start gaining some momentum, something happens to where the government takes its attention off of cannabis. And right now, I feel like we have the full breadth of the government's attention, and banking is a big component. We're having conversations with the exchanges. I mean, I used to work at the New York Stock Exchange, and so I have connections back into that. They're not in a position to list us on, a Schedule 3 reclassification, but they're doing their work, and there might have to be some type of, implementation of protections for these institutions, right? Because the anti-money laundering concerns and some other things that, they're going to, they want our business, but they're also zero risk type of institutions. And so same thing with a lot of the institutions when you think about that money coming in. So we're having the right conversations. But again, we're training for a marathon. We just don't know when the race is. So we just got to make sure that we're going to continue to run and be in shape when, when the starting gun goes off. So
when the time comes, I agree. So I feel like it's one of those things where, you're saying we've been wrong a ton of times in the past, and we've been wrong as well. But I feel like each time pushes you a little bit closer, and you only really have to be right once. You have to get it right. And I think we're as close as we've been to getting stuff moved ahead, which is great. And a good time, I think. Interesting.
Well, here's the thing that people need to pay attention to. We're not in the rumor cycle right now. Like yes, like we're hearing rumors of banking, but like They just said we're into the rulemaking process for reclassifying cannabis. Like, this isn't like, and Biden's saying this. This isn't like I heard from Biden's gardener that, you know, they heard over coffee and it's like this, you know, horrible game of telephone. It's literally, we're hearing directly from Joe Biden that he wants to get something done. And keep in mind here too, under the Trump administration, he was the friendliest president to cannabis that we had. So I would say, don't be afraid of the R next to his name if he were to get reelected, because he was tremendously friendly to the cannabis space. Now, I'm not condoning this. This is politics aside, but I will say, you know, he is also very USA job focused, and cannabis. I mean, it checks all the boxes on both sides, and it's really baffling that we've taken this long to get to this point. But again, patience and good things to come.
Yep, I totally agree. And I know you're just talking about it from a risk perspective in terms of what comes next. So I totally understand there. All right. Well, you mentioned 280E a little bit. Would love to kind of tap a little bit more into that and talk about opportunities, what that frees up. You were stating some pretty big numbers, which is great. What are you guys looking at? What's on the table for where that might get deployed into?
So Florida, you know, we haven't quantified what a CapEx budget would look like in Florida. But, you know, I racked off all the states that, you know, we've gotten ahead of from an adult use transition. We were a leader in Illinois, to New Jersey, to Connecticut, to Maryland, Ohio. Obviously, we have a, you know, maxed out footprint there. Florida is our top state. And, you know, you know, and I want to really get this point across as well, as, you know, if you look at the OMMU report, market share is coming down. And, you know, again, people are so quick to react without getting the facts behind it. But what we did is basically, you know, systematically have turned rooms off to kind of retrofit to get more output out of our main Apollo Beach cultivation facility, which we highlighted on our earnings call. So when you think about, that's a, you know, a big step ahead of a potential adult use transition. But, you know, you're talking 22 million people, you're talking 120 million visitors a year. You look at Maryland, right? So that flipped, and that was a 2.5 to 3 times bump. Maryland's not Florida. I mean, Florida's our top market. And so you can imagine the time and attention that that's going to get from us, but also the opportunity that it creates for us. You know, we did $222 million in revenue alone in Florida. So now do the simple math, right? So use the Maryland numbers and then say, well, wait a minute, there's 120 million visitors. And so you can start to see how important of a state that Florida actually is. And being a margin leader from an, you know, adjusted EBITDA perspective, and a free cash flow leader in the space, it's a really important state that we continue to have a first mover advantage. And so 75 current move dispensaries that are open down there. And, you know, we have 2 cultivation facilities encompassing what 265,000 square feet of indoor grow, which is a big differentiator for us in the market as well. So Florida will get a lot of attention. You know, we also have been a leader in really implementing a lot of automation into our system. And so, you know, when you think about some of the value and the mid-tier brands that we've, you know, created, you know, you take that human component out and then you really start to get more automation behind it, which creates more efficiency, which gives the consumer a higher quality product at a lower price. And so we've been able to really focus on, you know, building in some more automation into our system. And, you know, M&A has never been off the board. I mean, you know, people have, you know, really been shy to pull the trigger on some deals. We have as well, just given how valuations have come down. But I will say that, you know, we've never stopped having those types of conversations. We're always looking at the right fits, but we're hyper patient, and, you know, but we're also ready to pounce if and when. And it's the theme of Verano, right? It's like always ready to take advantage of an opportunity, but then we always are very patient and diligent in the way that we go about it. So, and then, you know, look, you know, we have a term loan that's now $300 million, you know, it's 6.5 plus prime. We have optionality on the first, you know, the remaining 50 million. So the first 100 million, there was a 1% prepayment penalty on it. So we took down 50 of that subsequent to the quarter. We're taking another 50 down at some point with optionality, but, you know, we haven't talked about timing about that. So you could think, you know, tightening up of the balance sheet if we have more cash coming in. So, you know, it's exciting. It's a hard question to answer because it makes you smile to think about what would you do with $80 million that's not inappropriately being taken away from you from higher taxation. But, you know, it's a good problem to have. But, you know, regardless of 280E going away, we'll continue to be a margin and free cash flow leader. But, you know, if that does happen, those are probably the main areas that we would focus on.
That makes sense. Yeah, it does feel like almost like what would you do if you won the lottery kind of thing, you know, have a huge windfall, be able to apply in a ton of different ways. But it seems like you guys are planning out and really trying to find the best opportunities to point that.
If I won the lottery, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, Mackenzie.
Oh, you wouldn't be on? You could come on.
Yeah, I'd be watching,
Here,
right?
huh?
And then trying to figure out what my cannabis portfolio looked like. But I would be a guest, maybe a guest every now and then. So.
You could, would you get a yacht or something crazy? Would you come in from your yacht? You could do that.
You know what's funny? I'm a very simple person, and a boat seems like a lot of work. So I would probably try to live the most simple life that I could possibly live. You know, given what we've been through, I've been in cannabis now for 6+ years, and it feels like a lifetime. And you know, there's got to be a movie at some point that's going to try to pinpoint the stress that we're under every day. So a shack on an ocean somewhere, I don't know. It's going to be very simple. So
That sounds good. That's fair enough. That's good. Again, I think sometimes when you're through hard times, it really strips down to figure out what's actually important. What's actually the things that make me happy. And a lot of the times it's smaller things and not bigger headaches, like managing a
yeah,
boat. I agree. I always say that. That's horrible. All right. Well, that's fantastic. I feel like you listed out a ton of interesting different things, but you mentioned Florida. So of course I would love to do a little state temperature check. I know, like you're saying, Florida definitely has a lot of people's attention and eye. But I know it's also a harder bar to clear, and I know people have talked about it. What's your thought on likelihood? How are you guys kind of taking temperature checks as we get closer to the actual, you know, ballot vote? How are you guys kind of keeping an eye on Florida for that?
yeah. I mean, we're actually pretty positive on this, and you know, we have a history of not spending money where we don't see value, and we put in $2.25 million into the campaign to really kind of push Say Yes on 3 for the ballot initiative. And internal polling that we're seeing, right? And you know, obviously we'll share more on our next earnings call, is pretty positive. And so, you know, you're going to see a variation of polls. It's like the presidential polls, like, you know, go back to 2016 and it was 100, I mean, literally 100% Hillary was going to win. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, wait a minute, the polls weren't right. So be very careful to what you're looking at, because I'm telling you, when you start to see more money being put into these types of campaigns, it shows what we're seeing, right? And so, you know, even look at DC. You know, we do put money into our efforts in DC, but like pharma alone put $300 million in, so we just can't compete with those types of dollars. But we would if we actually saw that we could, you know, the money that we would implement would actually pay off in the long run. So we feel very good about Florida. We feel that it's polling well. We feel like there's some big issues, you know, some items on the ballot that are going to bring a lot of voters out, abortion being one of them. And so, and again, this is, you know, opinion aside, but like it's going to bring people to the boxes. And when you get people to the boxes and you have the right campaigns that actually show the breadth of what this plant medicine can really do for the consumer, right? And for the patients, there's a powerful message there. And so we're seeing really early on in the polling numbers that it's polling extremely well.
Not surprising. Again, I think with cannabis nationally, and I know, again, that's not state by state necessarily, but it does seem like something people can agree on. And I feel like having the medical program that's working pretty well in place has to set them up well for success. But I think you're right. Don't take your foot off the gas and don't say, it's going to pass and be easy. I think that's why it's important to have that yes on 3, which is great.
There's a stigma, right? And you know, cannabis, when you think about it in DC, it's, oh my God, that's a gateway drug. And I'm like, I have eaten a sleep edible every now and then, and I've resisted heroin, but like, you know, it's amazing what gets ingrained into people's minds, right? And so you know, and again, you look at even how hard it was for like CBD to get across the finish line, and it's non-euphoric, and you see the health benefits behind what these plants can actually do for people. But we're also going up against a lot of big industries, right? Like go back and rewatch the Super Bowl and tell me how many Verano ads you saw versus Pfizer. And so these are dollars at play. You know, there's studies that have shown that pharma will be impacted by $7 to $9 billion if, you know, it gets across, you know, if cannabis gets across the finish line. Well, those are real dollars for that industry. You know, you're not talking about, you know, pocket change anymore. And so we know what we're up against, and you know, but we are feeling very confident in the numbers that we're starting to see.
That makes sense. Is that why it was important to kind of unite on the yes on 3 to really get it done with having multiple people kind of rowing in the same direction ultimately?
Absolutely, and you know, a big shout out to Trulieve. I mean, they very much have led the charge down in Florida, and Kim has been and team have been fantastic down there. And so we've you know, definitely united and, you know, really trying to, you know, play a strong presence in the state as well. Because you know, when the full capacity of our facility was online, I mean, we were the number 2 player down in Florida. And so when we get those rooms back up and running at a higher capacity, by the way, you know, we anticipate really grabbing some market share back in that state. Well, we want to represent that also with our efforts, because we have a lot to gain if Florida goes across. We could be a standalone business and be a really, really nice standalone business if it was just Florida. So, you know, for us, there's a lot of incentive to continue to put that effort in there.
That makes sense. Well, again, it's not just Florida. I know there are a ton of states that are definitely have people's attention as well. Ohio, I know that they're well and through, which is great. Pennsylvania, not quite yet. Any thoughts on
Yeah.
those two markets as well?
Yeah, Ohio, it sounds, we thought fall, fingers crossed, it might turn on a little bit sooner than we anticipate, maybe June, July, but, we're not, again, budgeting that for that anything kind of near term, but if it happens, great. We have 5 dispensaries open, we have a grow, and so we're really ready to rock, if and when Ohio turns on. Pennsylvania, we have 18 stores open. There's a lot of retail right now just sitting, waiting in Pennsylvania. Strong medical program that's kind of plateaued for a little while because people have continued to anticipate adult use turning on. And there's been some stops and starts, but, Shapiro and team, they definitely have all the incentive to get that across the finish line. And we're hearing, good things about a potential passage in the fall into, a start into mid next year. Again, we've been down this road before, so we're always cautiously optimistic. But we have 2 grows. We have a 62,000 square foot indoor facility, with tiers, stacked tiers. That's really putting out some high quality product into the market, as well as a second facility. It's about 75,000 square foot building that, if demand really starts to ramp up, because wholesale is really the next wave, right? And we showed strength in wholesale, in New Jersey. Our Q1 wholesale numbers were actually up 14% from Q4, and Q4 is a very strong quarter, right? And so for us to be up 14% shows you that a lot of the efforts that we're putting on the wholesale front are starting to take root. 50 new accounts open from a wholesaling perspective in Illinois, New Jersey in Q1. Illinois, by the way, was flat from Q4 to Q1, which is a massive win. If again, we think about how strong the Q4 market is compared to a Q4 quarter is compared to Q1, but Pennsylvania is going to follow Illinois very similarly, where your retail is going to start to dilute down a little bit, but the real opportunity is going to be on the wholesale front. So we'll be ready to go in that state as well. And listen, we're going to continue to broaden our portfolio. A while ago, we launched out, value and mid-tier, our Savvy and our Essence brands in Pennsylvania. We're launching our Bits edible line as well, which has been, very, very well received in the other markets.
Yeah, very cool. And so you mentioned Illinois, New Jersey. I did want to talk very briefly about sort of other states that get left out sometimes, I think, a little bit, not New Jersey necessarily, or Illinois, maybe West Virginia. Any other states? What other states are sort of in the mix that you guys, that maybe we don't hear about as much, but are still important markets?
Yeah, we have heavy hitter states. I mean, we're in 13 states, and you have your heavy hitters: Illinois, New Jersey, Florida, PA, Connecticut. We were a leader when that adult use market turned on. So Connecticut's been a very strong market for us. Maryland has been a very, very nice, adult use turn on. And so that state continues to be very strong just to support the overall portfolio. Arizona. Yeah, there you go. I love it. Yeah, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, we've been, very strong player in both of those markets, and they've had their ebbs and flows, but you're kind of continuing to see some stabilization in those markets, right? And you're seeing us really start to ramp up our efforts there. And then you do have, smaller states like a West Virginia, right? Where it's small, but it's accretive, and it's just a nice addition to the portfolio. So we continue to put some effort around that. And then our Michigan and Arkansas, we have 2, a dispensary in each of those states. And they do tremendously well. So, from top to bottom, it's like you have your heavy hitters, and, as those markets continue to ebb and flow at times, you have these, kind of mid to smaller additions that really kind of help smooth out the imbalances, which is really why we wanted to produce the state by state level revenue. We have nothing to hide, and we really want to show the market, on a state by state perspective, seasonality, trends, how we're performing in each of those states, because we want to be as transparent as we possibly can. Because then now go back to rescheduling to 3, institutional dollars potentially coming in, and we know who we're auditioning for. So to be very transparent and to help these portfolio managers understand what our business looks like, I can't say enough how important it is to be transparent in this space, and we're going to continue to do so.
Yep, that makes fantastic sense in terms of making it very friendly to people who are coming in, need that education, need to really understand how the business works. And yeah, that makes sense. Totally. All right. Well, then one of the things you mentioned back when we were talking about 280E and how it could be deployed was sort of tech a little bit, but I know that sort of applies a little bit with apps, loyalty stuff as well. Just wanted to talk a little bit. We have in the office one of your classic hats here. Would love to talk about the Cabbage Club. I know that was, this year a little bit. Would love to hear how it's going, what it is, even maybe to start is a good one.
Yeah, so it's a loyalty club, a loyalty membership. You know, you think about when you get people tied into a network like that and you give them incentive to join these loyalty networks, the repeat customer aspect of that becomes pretty great, right? And so slow to start, you know, we launched in Illinois, New Jersey, and internal, we're going to put more metrics and numbers out there once we get, you know, a little bit more stabilization of how it's looking, but it exceeded internal expectations to start. You know, people have loved the aspect of, you know, the deals that they get. There's different strains and stuff that are going to be produced that, you know, these loyalty members are only going to have access to. Obviously, you have savings on an annual basis. There's hot cookies, warm cookies when you go into each of our stores, and it's just trying to take care of the consumer and say thank you for being a consumer. And in reality, you know, the cost of the loyalty membership, you know, is far more paid for, you know, with the savings and everything else that you're going to get as part of that. But, you know, you think about a Costco model, or you think about even just like, you know, frequent flyer programs, right? Like I'm a United guy. And there's times that I will actually take a connecting flight just so I can fly with United and get the perks that are associated with having a lounge or something along those lines. So it's very similar in mindset to just a loyalty program. It's trying to create that consistency. And, you know, I think when you look, you know, back at, you know, cannabis as a whole, you know, you have your medical program, right? And people are tremendously loyal, you know, with that med card, but they weren't necessarily tied into a dispensary, you know, early on in the stages. And this is like trying to really capitalize on that loyalty from an overall perspective. So right now, Illinois, New Jersey, we're launching in Maryland, Michigan, and Connecticut here in the near term on July 1. So more to come. And so, you know, Mackenzie, wear your hat and maybe and then join. But and it's trying to think outside the box, right? I mean, we were very much early on, like, you know, grow cannabis, sell cannabis, and nobody has really started to take those next steps into the evolution of what the retail experience is going to look like. And you know, George's background has been all retail, restaurants, and you can really start to feel the knowledge that he has, because now the time and the opportunity is presenting itself to go down this path. Because, you know, when you think about data, apps, you know, technology, you know, we have data that we can consume now. 2016, we have no clue what we were doing. Like literally, it was throwing spaghetti against the wall. And we were like, we don't know if they're going to like this package, this branding, that, you know. And now we're absorbing real data, and we're going to be able to see what to implement, and we're making data-driven decisions. So Cabbage Club was very much a data-driven thing that we wanted to implement and look for more coming from us, because we're really trying to think outside the box.
Yeah, I will definitely say, funny you mentioned the restaurant connection. I know George obviously has the background there, but we, following restaurants and sort of the trends there, see a lot of loyalty programs springing up now. So it is sort of like a normalization thing, but I think in terms of like, it's just a business. And of course, most businesses might have a loyalty program, but I do think recently there is a lot of, and there's better ways to kind of reach your consumers, get feedback from them, whether that's what they're purchasing or direct feedback as well, which is fantastic. So I think that's really great. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to a warm cookie in Maryland eventually. One of these days, I'll get there eventually.
One of these days, we'll keep it.
That sounds good. Well, so then I guess final thing is sort of why was now sort of an important time to get this launch, and how long was it sort of in process to get to this point?
It was, I mean, all of a year. And so this isn't a quick turnaround. You have to make sure you're aligning with your POS systems, and everything has to be aligned. And you have to have almost like a seamless, flawless implementation, right? Because if you're going to come in and you're excited, you're wearing your Cabbage Club hat, and you're like, where are the cookies? And then where's my strain? And this didn't work. And so we wanted to make sure that the customer experience was always front and center on this one. So we took a while. We did a lot of internal testing. You know, we had, you know, actually some fun, you know, projects internally that really kind of helped characterize what Cabbage Club was going to evolve into. But why now? Because the opportunity was there. You know, we saw the need, and we saw the actual opportunity to implement a loyalty program where you can really start to grab your consumers. And it is giving back to the consumer, right? It's not just necessarily about the, you know, the necessary, like getting the fees in from the loyalty. It's about, you know, giving back to the consumer. And so we saw that opportunity, tested it out in a few markets. It's gone extremely well. And so we're going to roll it out into other markets and continue the trend here. But yeah, we were happy to be the first to launch this in the US. So
That's great. Yeah. Again, I feel like now is a good time and an important time to kind of attract and retain customers. So I think that's a fantastic program to get that done, which is great. All right. Well, we covered a ton. Again, ton in cannabis all the time. So I appreciate you sitting down to kind of help us digest it a little bit. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it's an exciting time, and our tone has changed internally. And again, if you want to get depressed, just look at what the markets are doing. But again, we're not focused on that, right? We care, and I want to really emphasize the fact that we all have our lives invested in this, right? So this isn't if cannabis doesn't work out, then we've invested a lot of time and effort into the equity that we've received in this. And I can say, we've never been more confident in the space than right now. And you think about how I started out with talking about all the states that have turned on adult use programs, states that are decoupling 280E. You're looking at, other states that are going to come on with adult use. And again, Florida's a behemoth. Florida's not a Maryland in the sense of, when Florida turns on, that's going to get the entire nation's attention. Some people probably don't even understand that adult use is on in Maryland. I'm not knocking your state, but I'm just saying, Florida, it's going to grab a lot of people's attention. And so, things are starting to move in the right direction. And then the big one, again, it's the DEA. It's the movement at the federal level. And, one of these days we're going to look back on this and be like, I can't even believe we're an illegal substance in the same vein as heroin. But here we are. And, but I'm just saying, to leave people on the note that it's if you've been invested in this space and you've been looking at the state, everything that's happening right now is everything that we've been waiting for, right? And it's when you train for that marathon and you put the right time and effort in and you follow the right training program, if you do that, most likely things are going to work out. And so, for us, it's we just continue to do the things the right way. We continue to position ourselves ahead of opportunities, and we'll see what happens in the coming months here. But we feel really good about where things are at, and especially what we've been able to do as a business.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that starting gun has gone off and now it's time to race. So things are really picking up, which is fantastic. All right. Well, Aaron, thanks again. Always appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being on, and we will catch you next time. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mackenzie.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.